Great.
Hey, folks.
Do you see that from Dave Emmett? He's calling on that number.
I don't see that number listed on the people that are
Yeah.
calling in. So I'm not sure
No, I
who that
don't.
is.
Yeah.
You can get started, Scott, if you want to.
Alrighty. I guess we'll see if he finds another way to connect there. Richie, do you want to go ahead and do the preamble and the roll call, and then we can do the vote for the acting chair after that?
Yep. We'll go that route. Okay. So just kind of a sound check because I'm doing it by a cell phone. Everyone can hear me okay? Any issues? Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So because of the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held electronically over the Zoom platform. It is authorized by the county's declaration of local emergency, the county's continuity of government ordinance, this authority's resolution from last year, in Virginia Code Section 2.2-3708.2, Subsection A3. The authority directors are not physically present at a single central location as it is unsafe or impractical to do so because of the pandemic and because of the county's declaration. The authority directors are participating electronically. This meeting is being held according to Section 6 of the county's continuity of government ordinance. The public has real-time audiovisual access to this meeting over Zoom and real-time audio access over telephone. Both is provided in the lawfully posted meeting notice. The public is also invited to speak during the public comment period. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Anyone interested in commenting should send a chat or question to the meeting facilitator or use the raise hand feature. If you are listening by telephone, please use the *9 feature to notify the facilitator. All speakers must identify themselves and the magisterial district where they live or have a business. This meeting is being recorded and it will be made available on the county's website. So now I'll ask the authority members to identify themselves and state their general physical location, and we'll do that by roll call. So Jay Fennell, I understand he was going to be absent.
No,
Peter Taylor, same.
Also absent.
no.
Okay. John Moore,
I'm at my residence in Samuel Miller District.
Sherry Buttrick,
I'm here and I'm in the Independent Republic of Whitehall.
Rose Emery,
I'm here, Rose Emery, and I'm in Free Union.
David Emmett. Was he here?
Yes.
Was that him? Dave, is that you?
He's here, but I think he's still trying to get audio access.
Gotcha. David Mitchell. David Mitchell.
Not yet.
Jenny Moore.
I'm here at my home in Crozet.
And Dr. Moses.
Here in North Garden.
So that's 1, 2, 3. So that is, Scott, that is 5. That is a quorum. So we could go forward. We will need a nomination for someone to chair the meeting because we have the chair and vice chair who are absent today.
Maybe we could get Chip to reprise his role as chairman for for one meeting and lead us down the path. That's my nomination.
I'll second that.
All right, I don't know if there'll be any are there any other nominations or is everyone okay with Chip running the meeting? So I don't hear any objections, so I'll feel that that's by acclamation, and so I'll turn it over to Dr. Moses.
We thank you for your support. I think we agreed that we would take any comments from the public if there are any at the beginning of the meeting.
No members of the public.
Right. Scott, what's on your agenda? First, approval of the minutes from a month ago.
First, I have to share my screen, which is an exciting agenda item. Hang on just a moment.
And away we go.
Yeah, one of the observations about technology is that as soon as you get accustomed to something, it's changed by Zoom or someone, and you then have to relearn it. So there's absolutely no learning curve to this electronic era.
Constantly back to zero. Yes, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the September minutes.
Any corrections or changes?
No.
Motion to approve?
I second.
So May.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Carolyn, are we okay doing that type of vote, or do we need a roll call?
That vote is fine.
Very good.
All right, I'll try to do a roll call for the rest of the meeting, but thank you all.
Okay.
All righty. Next item is the Caton donation proposal. And I can no longer see the attendee list, so I'm not sure if Mr. Rasmussen, who's representing the Caton family, is here yet, but he may be at some point. In any case, this is a new easement donation proposal on 42 acres on, it says Four Winds Lane, but this is actually Free Union Road near the intersection with Woodlands Road. And interesting, this is the second time in my experience with the easement authority that we've had a property that has already been subdivided that comes in to essentially undo that subdivision by placing the entire property under an easement. So that's the case here. This is a property that was subdivided into 8 small lots and one 21-acre lot. And in typical by right subdivision fashion for Albemarle County, but the current owners are proposing to keep it as a single property with a single dwelling. It meets the acceptance criteria, and 8 dwellings would be eliminated. Terms are no subdivisions and all 9 parcels are to remain under a single ownership. The existing 8,000 square foot dwelling or its replacement up to 9,000 square feet would be permitted. All else is as standard with a 35-foot riparian protection zone along the creek, along the boundary and the edge of the pond. So you'll notice I'm doing these presentations in a little bit different order now, and they will make a bit more sense. In terms of the resources to be protected on the target resource list, this property is in a water supply protection area, which is, say, it's just upstream of the South Fork Ravenna Reservoir. And it has a very large area of, over 98% of the property has important soils for agriculture. So given that, staff would recommend that the authority accept this proposal, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Scott?
I have a question. It looks like there's 2 major structures there now. Is one a barn or something, or is it another?
It is. Yeah, it's a barn and utility structure. The one that's back in the woods there. If you can see my pointer, it's here. This is the dwelling. There's a garage, and then there's the barn building back in the woods.
And we're blacking out the structures on the satellite view now.
No, sorry, that's just the county's buildings layer. Just makes it a little easier to see the outlines.
All right, I was I was a little amused by that, but okay.
Very old habit from growing up with USGS plat or topo quads and buildings being black.
Yep, I got it.
This would seem to be straightforward.
I have a quick question, Scott, in terms of the replacement of the house, of the dwelling up to 9,000 square feet, would that be limited to the same location? I'm assuming it is.
We didn't specify it in this case.
Because the next question will come, I know what'll come up later is building envelopes. I'm just saying it's going to come up. So if it's
Well,
in this, if it's
Yeah,
in
and
the
they
same
haven't
site,
proposed any. I mean, one thing we could do is, if the authority wanted to, you could approve it, provided that the replacement would be in the same location. And then if they either want to change that or want to come back with building envelopes, which I have not yet heard about, then they could just come back next month and we could clear that up.
What
We
about,
could be drafting in the meantime anyway.
right? I mean, if you, I suppose the problem is that if you don't specify, if you just say replacement, then the argument becomes, do they have to, does the replacement have to be on the same foundation or the exact same footprint either way?
I don't think we care that level of detail. We have in the past either just done envelopes, or we have said, Sherry's got the word for this, that she prefers for, I can't remember if it's in or at the same location, which is enough to give some wiggle room.
Right. I was
In
only
this
thinking,
case, you can,
go ahead.
I was just saying, in this case, you have a very convenient, already described envelope in parcel number 4334A3.
That was my point too, yes.
Do that as well.
I suppose it's not a building envelope per se, it's a dwelling envelope.
Yeah, we should call them that, really.
So either make it that or, address big buildings that are not dwellings. At the least, I would think you would address them with a setback from the road, if not enveloping. Obviously, the big barn is not as conveniently tax map parcelized, but I would think that you'd want some setback from the road. I mean, I think this is his house, right? I think I know where this is, and there's not huge visibility from the road, but it might be good to have at least a farm building setback. But it's nice that the dwelling is in a small envelope. Who represents Rasmussen?
Yes.
I mean, I'm surprised that Lee hasn't sort of worried about this for his own tax deductions.
And he may come back to that later. I think the idea that someone raised of just using the existing parcels and envelope is probably fine. The reason I didn't propose a setback in this case is we usually only do those on roads that are designated as entrance corridors or scenic byways. Doesn't mean you can't do it here.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why Free Union Road is not
yeah.
a scenic byway of some sort, but apparently it is not.
I mean, it's a road of enough consequence that I would think we would want a setback from it.
And are you suggesting a setback for all structures or just dwellings? Well, it wouldn't be dwellings in this case.
I personally think that the dwelling ought to be enveloped in parcel 3A, and that there's, because obviously big farm utility type structures do tend to crop up, given the fact that there is one at the back. So
a setback of 250 feet would be about the depth of that parcel there across the front.
250 feet is fairly useless, I think.
See, 500 is.
I think the thing to do would be to go there and see where, as I remember, this land drops off. It's sort of, you can see into the farm for a little, and then it drops off along about maybe where the parcel 3A begins. So I would go and look at it and figure out what visual sense.
Let's see, I'm trying to pull up a. Not pull up a ticket.
And I don't think we can do it here. I'm not worried about doing it here. I just would ask that you go and look at it and that some setback occur, unless Lee decides he wants to make envelopes on all of the, buildings of any size.
Right.
And I suggest that we have the building envelope A3. If there's some issue with that, we can discuss that further. But given that this is already subdivided, it's got lots of parcels, therefore it's got a lot of value to give up. I'd be a little surprised if there weren't some sort of attention to the tax deductibility at all of this. I'd be interested to hear what Lee has to say about it.
Yeah, honestly, I have.
How do you translate that into a motion that we can act on today?
Yeah, that was my question. Are you suggesting we defer this, Sherry?
No, I mean, I'll make a recommendation. I mean, a motion that we accept this conditional on a dwelling envelope comprising parcel 3A and a setback to be determined by staff as to what is visually necessary.
For any accessory structures?
Or anything over 500 square feet. I mean, it gets a little dicey if you can't have a run-in shed, in the.
Can
Or
we
what-
say, can we say a setback to be determined at the November meeting? Would that be appropriate so that we can get going with the paperwork and have everything done up to that point? I mean, I know staff is sometimes reluctant to make decisions or be in that position to have to, but I'll defer to Scott as to that.
I mean,
Well,
I feel like
there's a certain
whoever is
practical
all
maximum.
around is the best decision, I just think we need a building envelope. I mean, I'm sorry, excuse me, a setback if there's not going to be an envelope for bigger structures. But I don't think we need to see it back again. I think staff can figure out what's useful unless the landowner comes back and says, heck, no, I don't want any of it. And, with the tax deadline coming up, they may want to kick right along and try to get this in before our November meeting should meet.
So
Well,
there's a
I'm happy to go out
Sherry,
there and look at it and find an appropriate,
Yeah.
But are you okay?
Yeah.
You're okay with that, Scott?
yeah, no problem with that.
Okay. And so this is going to be for structures for structures greater than 500 square feet, right?
Sherry, would you like to put that in a motion?
Sure, I'm sorry, I thought I already did. I make a motion that we that we approve this project to the main house being in the envelope comprising parcel 3A, and that there be added to this setback road to be determined by staff or other buildings over 500 square feet.
A second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I did have a question. The blue segment of stream on your illustration, Scott.
Let me bring that back up.
I can see where it goes off the property at the top part, but it just sort of ends right there, sort of where the property boundary is. And I was curious whether that extends to the road or where does the stream go after that?
Well, that's at the corner of 34A1 there is the upper end, and the stream at that point is intermittent, but it does drain pretty directly toward what flows into the South Fork water or South Fork reservoir. So,
I see. And there's also a lake. It doesn't flow into that pond there?
It does flow into that pond, and it goes out this upper end and continues downhill.
So the buffer is along the edge of the lake or pond.
Right.
Okay. All right. And question answered. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Should we call the roll?
Let me find that. I'll do that. Let's see, John Moore,
Aye.
Sherry Buttrick,
Aye.
Rose Emery,
Aye.
let's see, Jenny Moore,
Aye.
and Hamilton Moses.
Aye.
David Emmett, are you on?
I fixed my problem.
And your vote?
I did not hear the full discussion.
So sounds like you're abstaining.
I will abstain.
Yes, sir. And David Mitchell, are you on?
Correct.
No? I'm not hearing from David, so in any event, it passes. I've got five ayes and one abstention, so the motion carries.
Thank you.
Aye.
You want to swear me in?
So Mr. Emmett, I understand you're here. Where are you located physically? Just kind of generally.
I'm in my office in Charlottesville.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. On to the next.
Yep. And as mentioned a couple of days ago, under new business, we have an additional proposal that became ready for your consideration. Property is owned by Ms. Alexander, who is here to help answer any questions, and she is represented by Mr. David Moyes, who is also here. He's our attorney representing her in this case. And so this is Logan Farm. I hope I'm saying that right.
Logan.
Logan, thank you.
Mhm.
I was wondering about that. Okay. So 153 acres in the very northeastern corner of the county. And this proposal meets all of the acceptance criteria and would eliminate 7 potential dwellings. So the proposed terms, these are the ones that were revised recently to clarify. There are 3 existing dwellings, all historic. The main dwelling, an old kitchen structure, historic kitchen structure, which has been converted to a dwelling. And then the smallest is the farm manager house. All of these would be subject to the no willful demolition clause that we have used before in similar cases. And then if in fact those structures were lost to fire or some other disaster, then they could be replaced in the same locations to the specified size limits, which are each slightly larger than their existing size, to allow for some flexibility. And in this case, there are not envelopes, but we are requiring that dwellings go back into the same locations. Almost everything else is standard, except under other structures, we're saying that the structures that are considered contributing to the Southwest Mountains Rural Historic District shall not be willfully demolished. I'll give you more details on that in a moment. And I did recommend a 100-foot riparian protection area along this perennial stream on the southwest side of the property. Now, there were some members of the authority who were concerned about that, so I checked in with Mr. Moyes, and he talked to Ms. Alexander, and just to make sure everybody was properly informed about what this involved. And the one issue that came up is what's in red here is that the one variation from the standard terms that Ms. Alexander has requested has been to have permission for one deck of up to 250 square feet within the buffer along the creek, which is a relatively small impact. So to say more about the structures, this is a greeny looking scan from the portion of the nomination form for the Southwest Mountains Rural Historic District, which talks about Logan Farm, thank you, and lists all of the structures that were surveyed, most of which are considered contributing. The well house here is no longer there, as I understand it, and the summer house gazebo is not considered to be a contributing structure. So that's the list, and just to give you an idea where all that is on the ground, This is a view from the west side of the farm. I realize this is an odd angle, but this is the only one I could find that showed all of the structures in question. So just to tie those names in the nomination form to structures in the ground, and I believe I got these right, but I'm open to correction if I messed up the tags here. It's the main house, the garage, the farm manager's house, which is the smallest of the dwellings, the granary or corn crib, the large barn, another barn, the smokehouse, which is contributing but has since been moved to a location closer to the garden.
Mhm.
And finally, what's called a detached kitchen in the nomination form, which is, again, that middle dwelling in size of the three. So you can see they're all together in a pretty compact area. Those are all the structures that were shown as contributing on the nomination form and that are still in existence. So, and again, here are the proposed terms. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Moyes and Ms. Alexander are also here to clear up anything you'll have questions about.
This would seem to be an ideal property to place under easement. Are there any questions or comments?
I had been discussing a little bit the actual text to be used for the no willful demolition, just to make its workable problems in the future. No willful demolition sounds, kind of a simple idea, but there are a number of gradations of it. If, for example, the structure becomes structurally unsound, if it's eaten up by termites or whatever it might be, do we want or do we not want the ability to approve a demolition of the structure? And I was just back and forth with Richie a little bit about the precise text because there seemed to be a little more focus on sort of intentionality than we might actually want. And I supplied to Richie, I think, about 4 variations of possibility, depending on how strict you want to be about this. The stricter one that I kind of like, that feels a little more objective, talks about no demolition other than demolition that has occurred as a result of natural causes, a disaster, an act of God type of thing. Or you may want something that is a little more flexible. And then I did want to be sure what secondary structures we were going to say were subject to no willful demolition. I mean, do we want, for example, a 20th century garage? And what are the structures? I mean, is it likely to create a hardship or a problem for the landowner that you might have a sort of a rickety old structure now has to be maintained and not demolished forever? And I just wanted to think through the details of that. And I like the concepts very much, but I just didn't want to put us in a position where we're coming back 5 years, 8 years later with problems resulting from how the historic language was drafted, just because BOF has had this problem before where that happened with us. So we're a little bit mindful of that.
Richie, have you had a chance to examine that proposed language and see whether it's appropriate to be presented to the donor?
So I have not. I just confirmed that I did receive it from Sherry, but I've been in a conference all day, so I haven't really had time to dedicate towards emails that had come in. I had shared some stricter language with her from, I think, Department of DCR.
The Department of Historic Resources language, that's probably what's being put forward by DCR. That looks absolutely something that we are not able to say grace over.
There you go.
I mean, we don't have that expertise to go there at all. I think that's
It-
kind of what your
right.
thought was.
Yeah. So I had said that perhaps Sherry had something that kind of was in the middle, but I have not had time to look at that. And so I apologize for that, but I just have not had time.
But I think the only real question that is kind of a conceptual question is how strict do you all want the anti-demolition to acts of casualty and acts of God, or do you want it to be soaked in the event of an expert saying that there's structural lack of integrity or that sort of thing?
But could
And
you,
that's kind of a qualitative choice for you all.
could you solve that problem by saying demolition would be acceptable if the structure becomes uninhabitable?
I sent around some language to Richie that is more technical than that, because one man's uninhabitable is another man's castle.
Well, if we,
You've seen the 3 pictures in the real estate assessment office of uninhabitable, good, and perfect. It makes that point. But basically, getting a sort of structural engineer type person to pass on it is, I think, probably the most objective way to handle it. And I sent Richie some language.
well, if it is appropriate for us to accept this property in concept, subject to an agreed upon language with the donor, the question is, Richie, do you have sufficient language that you can engage the donor in getting that?
I would presume so, based on what Sherry sent me, and then what I have from DCR. So if we want to pass to November, just to look at what that language is, so that the authority is accepting everything in concept, but wants to look at that particular language. I think would be fine.
I wouldn't want to act precipitously today, but the year is getting on and there are consequences to delay. It's a question of the sense of this group. Do you wish to accept the proposal today, subject to terms that are then mutually agreed, or do you wish to have it come back?
Well, I'd like to know what the terms are first. I'd like to hear the language, or if you could send it around.
I guess my thought is that we can work on the deed and we can get it 90 to 95% there. And then if we bring that language to the authority in November, just focused on that one issue. And if we get that approved, then within 24, 48 hours, we can have a deed.
I do think it would be a good idea to know what structures are going to be subject to this, particularly the non-residential structures. So if we
Right,
could
and
maybe,
the only criterion I had to go by was contributing versus non-contributing. I don't have a rational basis for not including something that's considered contributing as far as the staff review goes. If you all want to change that list, you can, but we can certainly, in the summary that's before you, instead of saying all contributing structures, we could actually list them out. And then if you all, in your final action next month, wanted to change that list, that's your prerogative.
Well, it sounds like we will see it back next month. Are there any other matters that need to be addressed before we conclude this today?
Well, I know if Peter were here, he'd bring up the stream buffer issue, and it'd be remiss maybe at least not even to touch on that. But I don't, if it's going to come back to us, we might have a chance to talk about that later.
Scott, in your reply to Peter, you mentioned that there was a rationale in this instance for 100 feet rather than 35.
I did, the couple of reasons. Let me share the map again so you can see this. larger version. There we go. So you can see the proposed 100-foot buffer is this darker blue area on the map. And then the lighter blue around that is the FEMA designated 100-year floodplain. So a couple of the reasons why we went with the 100-foot buffer was, one, there's already quite a bit of wooded buffer there that matches pretty well with that 100-foot setback. So we're getting a very effective existing wide buffer there in many locations, not all of it, many of them. Happy Creek is a perennial stream, so that's more important for protecting water qualities. That's a higher volume, constantly flowing stream than many we see. So we've got two water quality issues there, and of course, having that buffer is a benefit to the larger community in controlling the flood flows that are limited by having that wider already wooded buffer in place.
Are the green tinted areas, properties already under easement?
That's right.
And what are the stream buffer widths on the adjacent easement that Happy Creek goes through?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't believe those are our easements. I think they're probably VOF. Well, actually, the one across to the northeast is an ACE easement. It's an older ACE easement, so they probably vary quite a bit. But they also vary in their condition.
Peter's objection, if I understood it correctly, was that accepting 100 feet would seem to be more restrictive than the usual 35, and that would set a precedent for future easements.
I think he was also concerned about the management difficulties for someone who is managing a property as pasture, which is a valid point. But in this case, again, they're not the entire length, but quite a bit of the length of this buffer is wooded rather than being managed for pasture and cattle access.
Which from the preservation standpoint or conservation standpoint makes it even more important to maintain.
Are the areas that are in open pasture land, are they fenced at present?
No, they are not. There's no cattle on this property and has not been for, what, Brenda, 13 years?
Yes, that's correct.
Ah, okay.
We bale hay on that property only.
Okay. So it's clear that you would just have to build a fence if you ever do go to back to using the land for pasture.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Are there any other comments or questions? Well, to the Alexanders, we thank you for bringing this to us. To summarize today, we would like to have another month to have you work on the language with the staff, and then it will likely receive a favorable thumbs up in a month.
Okay, that sounds fine. My one concern, I might add, is the larger barn. When I bought the property many years ago, it is in disrepair, and we have done some work on it, but it's not really a usable barn. And this is the one that's marked a large barn. You can see that the barn itself is at one angle, and then there are add-ons to one side of it, and there's a run-in area to the other side. So it's been pieced onto over the years by unskilled people. The one area to the end actually has vinyl siding up, but there's nothing behind the vinyl siding. So,
but undoubtedly, it's historic vinyl.
Oh yes, obviously. So there are a couple of these structures. I've done a lot of work on the structures. The manor house is impeccable. It's in perfect shape. I've worked on that for the last 15 years. The smaller barn is in excellent condition. The laundry kitchen very nice structure, and the farmer's cottage, yes. But the granary area, that is a fairly good structure, but not that large barn.
So is the
Could I ask what the
original
large-
large barn? Sorry.
Could I ask what
It's-
the large barn is used for now?
It is not used for anything.
Okay, so it's empty.
It's
It's
been
or-
empty. It has some storage. We use the run-in section of it. I have tractors in there. That is the only usable part of the barn.
Does this mean that you're asking for greater latitude to modify that structure?
That's correct.
That suggest that you work that out with Scott and Richie between now and next month, if that's possible for you to do.
10 minutes
Okay.
late.
Okay, Scott, have you
Yeah,
actually been on the
This
property?
is why I was thinking
Not
we
yet.
really needed it individually to each structure.
Mhm.
Well, if it would be okay for me to visit, I can come out and get more detailed photos, and we can present the list of structures in more detail next month. And we can be editing the rest of the document in the meantime with no problem, and then have this one section and the related details come back. Like Richie said, we can be mostly done with this and have this one last issue to clarify next month, and then, finish off with in a couple days after that.
Okay, that's all.
Is
Could
that
I
agreeable?
ask what the Alexanders plan to do with that large barn? I mean, do you plan to make it a useful structure, or what do you have a plan for it?
My plan was, it's unclear at this point because it's either a structure that is taken down or is modified to a useful barn. You have to step up into the barn. It has a concrete foundation around it that is approximately 12 to 14 inches. So you can imagine trying to take cattle in. They have to step up in order to get into the barn. I don't really know what the barn was originally used for. I've never seen a barn quite like that you have to step up in order to get in it, meaning any sort of cattle or horses. So it's kind of strange, and it was almost as though maybe it was for pigs or something like that. It's the only thing I could think of. The stalls are very, very short, and you could not use that for horses, nor could you milking cows. You couldn't bring cattle in to milk or anything like that.
I see. Now, is there any danger that it will fall down, or is there any issue there?
Well, no, I don't think there is an issue with that. It's just unusable.
Okay.
That's all.
Fair
It's
enough.
unusable.
Fair enough.
I have barns at my other farm at Waverly. And so I'm very familiar with working barns, and this is not one of them.
Okay.
Well, we can also craft the terms to state that, if those add-ons are recent and past the date of the actually contributing structure, then we wouldn't need to apply the no demolition terms to those later add-ons. So we can talk about it in more detail.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Any other questions?
No, but I'd like to request, I think it would be useful information for us to have, what those adjacent approved buffer widths are on the stream. And it would also be useful to know whether when DCR or VOF approves an easement, or excuse me, a buffer along a stream, whether they would approve construction of a deck within that buffer.
I think VOF has some, not necessarily template, but add-on language for structures like that are Particularly, we had an easement recently that was on the James River. So it had a sort of an observation deck right on the river. So I think that we would be okay with that. I suspect also, John, that the easements that adjoin in this area that would be VOF easements are really old. And they may well have been before the era of stream buffers, or certainly, more minimal stream buffers.
That's probably
But
true.
also, I'm not sure that we would require more than 35 feet in this instance, not being in the watershed, not having a rare species, not being a species of concern or some such thing as that. So, but if the landowner requests and wants the 100 feet, we would be delighted to have that, I think.
And the other thing that just popped into my head is, if that deck's in the 100-year floodplain, are they going to get a permit approval to do that? I don't know. Just something to consider.
So
I was thinking about that as well.
I did respond to Mr. Moyes yesterday and indicated any approval that this board, this authority would give would not constitute a clearance or a permit, special use permit for building it. They'd still have to go through zoning.
Yeah, I think that's just
good.
a decent heads up to have, for sure.
Sure, that's great.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much for bringing this to us. It's an ideal property, both from the land conservation and historic preservation perspective. We'd be happy to, if all goes well, approve this in a month.
Okay, sounds
It's
wonderful.
a great
Sounds good.
addition to the Southwest Mountains Rural Historic District protection.
Yes,
Thank you
excellent.
very much.
Thank you. I appreciate you working with me on this, and I'm sure we can finalize this next month.
Yeah, and I
Thank
think
you.
we could come up with some definitions that would resolve any ambiguity about these historic structures. We use definitions in the VOF easements regularly now. We may also propose to satisfy some of the recent tax issues, a building envelope.
Good.
So
That sounds good. I'm glad that you're taking that under advisement, Mr. Moyes.
yes, ma'am, I think it's necessary now. And a
Alas,
setback,
yes.
we in our drafting on this, we have proposed a setback as well to get this final draft done, which we'll obviously work with Scott on.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
I'll be in touch the next day or so to talk more about it.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Any other new business, Scott?
Not for me.
Anyone else?
I guess one thing I would just bring up, Scott, for ease of having to actually do these building envelopes when they crop up, is thinking that sometimes there's been the thought that the building envelopes had to be surveyed, but we usually just GPS them. And obviously that is vastly more practical as you get towards the last quarter of the year.
Yeah.
And I think if there's any technical problem with that, either Chess or Kim may have some expertise in that area.
Right. And that's what we did recently with the Guff property, the old Woodville easement, it was all phrased in terms of GPSing the coordinates of those corners. So yeah, we've got several people who can do that. And frankly, I'd like to learn. So I think we will stick with that.
Any other new
Very
business?
good.
Any old business?
Sherry mentioned that she might want the board to have a refresher on FOIA just to avoid any public meeting concerns. I don't know if we want to do that now, or if perhaps we want to wait to November when we have when we should have a full meeting at that time.
Yeah, why don't we wait till we're bored and we don't have anything better to do?
So I'll give everyone just the brief, kind of the brief overview that I gave Sherry and Pete. The concern is that email is going to the full authority and then generating responses. And the risk is that if responses come fast and furiously, then it may constitute a public meeting. And so what I told Sherry was, it's always best not to reply all to an email. So if Scott sends an email and copies the full authority, it's probably best just to respond to Scott or to me if I do that, and let us filter as to whether other members need to receive the response, or just send it to one other member who might be who might have an interest in the matter. So to just avoid electronic conversations between three members. The other, so that's just kind of don't reply all, just kind of, the other thing is to let it age for 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, so that if you feel compelled or we need to reply to all, then it's not a contemporaneous conversation. So let it age like a fine wine or maybe a cheap wine.
Cheap wine.
Richie, I may
Yes,
be
sir.
I may be the offending party in my response to Peter that triggered this question.
I'm pretty well convinced it might have triggered the question, but there was no public meeting.
What you're saying to me is something of news. You're saying that a written email exchange may be construed as a meeting of the body, which would then be in violation of the
Yes,
requirements.
and you're right.
Right.
And that's if it becomes contemporaneous. So that's why I say if anyone receives an email from, that goes to all of the ACEA or to 3 or more members, just let it sit for 15 or 20 minutes so that you're not engaged.
And I remember that there was an issue about decision-making. In other words, if by email we were seeming to come to a decision on something, that would also constitute an illegal, I suppose it would be meeting.
Well, I think that would be one and the same in order to vote on something like that. But I mean, to vote on something, it needs to be, so the meeting needs to be noticed. So in order to take any type of action,
Right,
it needs to be noticed. Even a discussion can be a meeting. So I don't know if there's a material distinction between a discussion and taking an action, because you have to meet to take an action. But you're right. We don't vote by email. We don't, because the public can't be invited to that. The other thing to
just the
keep in mind,
idea of
it's like
making a decision,
well, you're allowed to,
Consensus building.
so Scott, well, you're allowed to politic. Don't get me wrong. You just can't do it. You can do it between two members. You can't do it between three simultaneously. The other thing is Scott, that taking a temperature isn't a violation of the open meeting rules. So, for example, in the Alexander donation, we could send around the proposed willful demolition or no willful demolition language, and engage the temperature of the members. It wouldn't be taking an action, but I could send it, and Sherry could say, looks good. Dr. Moses could say, there's no way in God's good earth I'm going to vote for this. And so then we work it up for a full discussion and a vote in a public meeting. So taking a temperature of the board is not a violation of open meeting. And
I
maybe
would say it's perilously close, however.
As long as each individual member is replying only to me and
Yeah.
Richie, then it's going to be fine. It's
Well,
when
we
they're
can
replying
always-
to everybody that
You
it
can always
doesn't.
respond to Richie, I think, and then it's all covered.
Oh, sure.
I think if the correspondence is to and from Richie, maybe copying everybody else. I think that's an additional help. But I just remember being torn up about this by Larry Davis because of the Fredericksburg case, where there was a very conservative interpret. So I've been a little nervous or mindful about this ever since.
Well, and you're right. And so if you respond to me, that's fine. I don't suggest that you copy everyone else. You know,
Yeah, okay.
so that's what gets us in trouble, the copying everyone else, because then it becomes essentially a contemporaneous communication that constitute or discussion of business that constitutes a violation of FOIA. That's all. And the better analogy is if you do it, and I do, is texting. And so if you're group texting, that becomes a little bit quicker than emailing. But nowadays, you know, email and texting, I don't know that there's a qualitative difference between those. The same would go for a conference call. If you get 3 members together to discuss business, then that's a meeting. Other thing is that the emails that you send between amongst members and between you and Scott is a public record. It needs to be retained as a public record. Doesn't mean you need to print it off or anything like that. And it's subject to FOIA. So there are citizens who go around, and if they get a bee in their bonnet, then they say, all right, well, give me all the emails from all the Conservation Easement Authority members for the month of October. And
the last 20 years.
Well, that's gonna be expensive.
Expensive, yeah.
But for the last month or the
I
last
delete
week,
stuff, you know.
well, I would caution you not to delete it, but
Oh God! All right.
but if you send it to Scott, it's a record.
Yeah.
But if you're sending it, you know, if it's between you and Rose, and you're discussing public business, then that's a record that should be retained.
You don't require my emails asking Rose if she wanted to come to dinner, do you?
No.
Thank you.
You're for inviting us to.
That's not a problem. If you're just no. Although I'm offended, I wasn't copied on that. That's all I have. That's all I have to say. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Any other matters to discuss?
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Unanimity. I was trying to beat your record, Sherry, of under 40 minutes, but we didn't make it.
We didn't make it.
Jeez.
That's
I'm
on
sorry.
me. I take that.
It was good, though. That was fast.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you all.
Appreciate the input.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks,
Yep.
Richie.
Thank you.